recording, and I'll just, he says 45 minutes. That's only half the session, so that's smart. Nice. Thank you for that tip, Vasilios. Yeah, so I'll record that, and I'll move on. Stop saying record. So copy and move, very similar commands. The move command, I think I use move to move that set of circles a specific distance. I can do the same thing with copy. I can select these circles, and I'll click copy, left click a base point, and I can type in 5 feet, enter for my first group, 10 feet, enter for the second group, 15 feet, enter for the third group, and I'm just sort of placing these at random distances, what have you. All right, so the copy command and move command are very similar. Let me undo that. Let me get rid of a few of these circles. And with regards to that circle and line I placed earlier, I could further use this circle and line as a column bubble if I wanted to. I could select the circle, select the line, select copy. I'll use the base point at the bottom of the vertical line, left click. I'll just move and left click a few places like so, and I've just created my column bubbles, if you will. I would want to trim out the line in the circle, but that would be a pretty nice start for column bubbles. Okay. Questions on erase, move, or copy? Questions at all? I mean, they're not hard, but I would just say they're not terribly intuitive commands. Some of the command structure. Okay. Cool. All right. So I'm going to move on to the extend and trim command. Back in the book, back on page 27. Extend and trim were sort of pulled off to the page 27, partially because of space. You know, it was a space restriction. But erase, move, and copy are very similar to each other, but they're not really similar to extend and trim. That's kind of why they're pulled off to the side. So the extend and trim command are so similar to eeach other that they are in the same flyout button. So I'm going to come into AutoCAD, and I'll use the little highlighter to sort of call your attention to where these guys are. So on the modify panel, I'm just going to underline modify, and your trim command is the command that sits on top of this pair of commands. But I want to start with extend first. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll click the little drop down arrow, the little disclosure button next to trim, and that will expand that little flyout menu, and I'll click extend. And I'm going to call your attention to the command line. If you're looking at my screen, the command line says to select boundary edges. Then it says extend, select objects, or select all. So what the AutoCAD wants me to do is to select the destinations for my extension. If I'm going to extend this horizontal line to this vertical line, AutoCAD wants me to select the vertical line first. But we have this option in brackets here on the command line and at the crosshairs. It says select object or select all. If you hit enter, you'll select all objects as destinations, as boundaries. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to hover over a line that I want to extend, and you'll see a preview. As long as there's a valid boundary off one of the endpoints of your line, you'll get a preview. The line will extend out to it. So I'll hover and left click to confirm that preview. Hover, left click, hover, left click. So I'm just kind of hovering and left clicking to extend my lines. I'm just sort of extending. It's a little weird around text, right? There's kind of like a window around text, so the line will extend up to that window, and it takes a couple clicks to extend through that text to the outer boundary. But when I'm done, I'll hit escape to cancel. Escape. So I'm going to undo that, and I'll do it one more time. I'll go extend, enter to tell AutoCAD everything's a boundary, and I'll just hover left at my midpoint. I can extend left, hover right at the midpoint, extend right, above the midpoint, up the screen, below, excuse me, down the screen. And there we have it. and I'll hit escape. So try that if you haven't already done so. Try that command. Okay. Hopefully that's working all right for everyone. I know it's a little unintuitive the way it's written. This is one of the commands I reached out to Autodesk about to ask them to change the command prompt, and they didn't say they wouldn't, but they haven't yet changed it. I just think it would be easier if when you start extend, if I click extend, let me back up a step. One more, there we go. I would love for us to say, when you click extend, I would love for the prompt to say, press enter to select all objects as boundaries. That may not be any more enlightening than select boundary edges. I don't know. It just seems like that would make it easier for a new user. But I've started the command. I'm being prompted to select boundaries. By hitting enter, I've selected everything as a boundary. Now, I don't need to extend to everything, but it's just a little. I'm going to have to hit enter anyways if I'm selecting boundaries. So I'll just hit enter to begin with, and then everything's a boundary. And I'm just hovering. I sort of look at the preview. If I like the preview, I left click to confirm it. And again, I'll hit escape when I'm done. Yeah, sure, no problem at all. Yeah, I'm going to undo. So I'm being asked to show it again. It's sort of a fine line between show it enough times and, oh my God, well, please stop showing it. So I'm trying to be judicious with that. So let's say I want to extend some objects, right? I'm going to start with, when you first start to use this, like if I just started my AutoCAD right now, trim would be sitting on top of this pair. Let me get rid of that highlight. The highlight might be blocking some of the so here's, imagine trim is on top. I'll go ahead and, so here's trim on top. I'll click the little drop-down arrow, and I'll click extend, and what I'll do is I'm being asked to select boundaries. You can't see it very well at the command, or at the crosshairs, at the dynamic input, but you can sort of see down here, it says, I have my Skype still on. Select boundary edges. I'm going to hit enter to select my boundary edges. So I'll click extend, enter, everything's a boundary, and then I'll left click, left click, left click. I'm just extending my lines out to their nearest boundary. So I'm sort of getting a little preview, and when I'm done, I'll hit escape. So hopefully that helped that time. I hope I didn't do it too quickly. Let me so we use Skype for Business, which is really nice for little chats between offices and stuff, but you have to put it on Do Not Disturb if you want to not be disturbed. I forgot to do that this morning. So. Did that help you, Lena? Did that the second time, or did that make more sense, or should I show it again? Oh, good. Okay, good. Yeah, it's not intuitive, right? It's not an intuitive command. I don't write software, so I don't know what it takes to make it more intuitive. Okay, so I'm going to do the reverse of that, or the trim, the trim command and extend commands. They're in the same flyout because they are so similar. So I'm going to use my drop down where extend is. I'll click trim, and now the command prompt on the command line says select cutting edges. So it's a similar command prompt, but a little bit different. All right, let me see it. I missed it. Yeah. So, Yelena, if I may, you said you missed the enter. That is the easiest part of that command to miss. It's not intuitive. I think if the prompt that I asked to be put in there was put in there, it would press enter to select all objects. And what's kind of sad about that is once you sort of lock in hitting enter after starting that command, you'll want to do it for all other commands, but it will only work for extend and trim. So here's an example with trim. I'll click the trim button, and I'm asked to select cutting edges. I'm going to press enter. Pressing enter selects every object in the drawing as a cutting edge. And I'll just hover over some line work and left click, and the preview is a little different. The preview is the line I'm hovering over will fade. I'll have a little red X at my crosshairs if I can trim that line. If I can't trim that line, like the little column bubbles I made, if I hover over these, I'll make a liar out of me. Oh, I guess that's true because of the circles. Let me trim the lines out of the circle. Now that I've gotten these lines to a point where they can't be trimmed anymore, I'll have a little white don't do it symbol at my crosshairs indicating that line can't be trimmed because it doesn't have a cutting edge. I'll hit escape and I'll undo that to start over. Trim, enter, just selected everything as a cutting edge, and then I'll select the lines, the portions of the lines that I want to go away. And I'll hit escape when I'm done. So a lot of what AutoCAD is when you're creating a floor plan, or if you're creating whatever the design you're creating, with AutoCAD, you're going to probably start off with a primitive shape. Could be a circle, could be a square, could be a rectangle, what have you, and then you'll begin to refine that primitive shape with modify commands, some of which would be trim and extend. If I kind of undo a little bit here, so I have some lines in my extend trim area that extend beyond each other, and I want to create just a rectangle, let's say. I can click trim, press enter, and snip off the lines that extend beyond the boundaries of that rectangle. And there I have it. So I'll sort of snip that all back to create, it could be a rectangular room, could be a rectangular piece of furniture, and I'll hit escape when I'm done. Okay. Questions on that at all? Questions on extend and trim, extend or trim? I'll just add to that a little bit. I'm just going to add a little bit here. Extend and trim are so similar. I'll go ahead and click trim. Trim, enter. On the command line, I wish I could make this larger for you, but I'm going to hover my pointer with the tooltip right underneath this horizontal line. I'll sort of call your attention to it. It says select object to trim or shift select to extend. So these commands are so similar you can sort of move back and forth between them with the shift key. So I can left click on this line to trim it, and then I can shift select that same line to extend it again. So trim, shift select, extend, trim, shift select, extend. It doesn't have to be the same. If I want to, it doesn't have to be the same line. I can, maybe I want to extend these lines through these circles. I'll zoom in so you can see it's a little better. Shift, and I'm just extending my lines into my circle, and then I'll release my shift key, and I can start to trim out some of these circular portions here. I'm just adding detail to this very primitive set of shapes. And when I'm done, I'll hit escape. I mean, that's not something that will kill you if you forget it, but it will save you a few minutes, a few seconds, let's say, if you can remember it. Okay. All right. So we'll just take a second or two and practice that, extend and trim, get a comfort level for it, and then we'll move forward. We'll trim, enter. Okay. All right, let's move forward a little bit. I'm going to bring the book back up. And so we've talked about erase, move, copy, and where possible, I like to select the objects first. AutoCAD wasn't always like that in the past, the distant past. You had to actually select your objects first. No, you had to select your command first, then select your objects, and then hit enter to move to the second part of the command. And that was very unintuitive. The enter part it needs to be built into the command prompt so we know that we're expected to hit enter, and it's not there. So the easiest way is to, when possible, select your object first, select the command, and then follow the prompts that follow that come along afterwards. Moving on to page 28. 28. Oh yeah, I always forget about this. I always think the next thing we're going to talk about is advanced draw commands. This is methods of selection on page 28, and I usually review. I've taught this class like once a week for 13 years, and I forget parts of it. Day 2, part 1, start to break. We talked about basic modify commands: erase, move, copy, extend, and trim. And then we'll talk about methods of selection, just different ways to capture the objects that we're going to use the modify commands upon. And then we'll talk about some advanced draw commands. And so we'll come back into, I'm going to keep using the same drawing, modify commands. So our methods of selection, there's several methods of selection. This was a much longer list, and this list used to come at the end of day 1. I rearranged the class a little bit, and I sort of shortened parts of it because I could see I was putting people to sleep, and I try not to do that too much. Really, there's one method of selection that's not listed here that we already know, and that is a single left click. If I want to select a circle, I'll single left click it, and I've captured it. That method of selection is referred to as top pick. I'm going to spell that out for you. I'm just going to type in T-O-P-P-I-C-K, top pick. And what that means is if I had like 2 or 3 or 15 circles all superimposed in the same location, and I left click, I'm picking the top one. So there's sort of a draw order that exists in AutoCAD, and the selection methods respond or cater to that that behavior. So top pick, and I only bring that up is in case you decide to go get certified. There is AutoCAD certification offered by Autodesk, and I know one of the questions refers to this method. What does top pick refer to? And you may see that on a test if you decide to get certified. So we already know that one, right? You've used this to select objects for copy. You've used this to select objects for erase or move, and that sort of thing. So that's one that's already probably part of your bag of tricks. The next one is the selection window. I'm going to zoom in on this. Selection window is make a box from left to right, and with your crosshairs, and every entity entirely enclosed in that box will be selected. And that's sort of shown. You probably all have color copies of this, or at least if you have the PDF. The selection window is shown on page 29 in the upper left corner. That blue window is a selection window. If I come back into AutoCAD and say I want to capture these 3 circles where I wrote top pick, I'm going to kind of come left and above my objects. I'll left click and release, and I'll move towards the right, and this is a selection window. This selection window has a solid boundary, has a blue tint to it, and it will capture anything it totally encloses. So if these circles were partially outside of that window, they would not be selected when I make my second left click. So again, it's left click and release, move from left to right, and totally surround the objects you're trying to capture. So once they're totally surrounded, left click, and it captured all three of those circles, but none of those lines. Escape. Left click, move from left to right, left click. Escape. So I could use the selection window to erase some of these circles, and I could use the selection window to capture some circles for copy. I'll go copy, left click center, left click midpoint, left click endpoint, escape. Okay. Hopefully that's working well for you. If that's giving anybody a hard time, let me know. Okay. So our next, let's call it third method of selection, is a crossing window. And the crossing window is shown on page 29 as a green tinted window with a dashed boundary. And the only difference between these two windows, the selection window and the crossing window, is where they start and where they move. Selection window starts from the left and moves towards the right. Crossing window starts on the right and moves towards the left. So if I go back into my AutoCAD and I want to capture all these circles, all these lines, right of my objects, I click and move from right to left, and now I get this dashed boundary window with a green tint, and left click, it captured all the things I simply touched or crossed. It's called the crossing window. Right, now I can copy all these selected lines and circles. Left click and release, left click and release. Copy. Let's pop these guys around. Just doodling at this point. Sorry, I'm a little fidgety today. Okay. So the selection window is a little bit more selective, or a little bit more discerning, I guess. The crossing window captures anything it touches, so sort of be aware of that. You have to be very diligent to make a window large enough to capture the objects you really want to select. The crossing window, not so much. Next method of selection is called Lasso, and Lasso and window they're different looking. Again, on page 29, the example of the Lasso is shown at the bottom of the page. It's sort of a more organic shape when compared to the window shape of the selection window and the crossing window. The only difference is holding your mouse button down. If I were to attempt to select these circles, I click and release, I get a window. But if I click and hold, I'm going to get what's called a lasso, this sort of blob, this sort of amorphous shape. But the functionality is the same. Click and hold, and the lasso from left to right is a selection lasso that needs to totally enclose the objects you're going to select. I'm not great with this. I'm not going to lie to you. I'll hit escape. Some of you folks may have already been seeing that, the lasso. You were trying to draw a window, and you got the lasso because you like to click and hold, which in earlier versions of AutoCAD you could do that. You could click and hold and you'd still get the window, but they kind of changed it in 2016 or 15. Okay. I'm going to hit escape to deselect those objects. So that's the selection lasso. If I go from right to left, this is going to be the crossing lasso. The crossing lasso has the same behavior as a crossing window. The crossing window at least can be used with the trim command. My trim extend area, I've left it untrimmed. I'll click trim, hit enter, and I can make my crossing window to just trim several lines at one time. Just trim back to that one that doesn't have a cutting edge. So you can sort of speed your process up. That's kind of the idea behind these different methods of selection. Selection window or crossing window allows you to capture just numerous objects to exercise some modify command upon. All right. Questions at all? Okay. Here's a behavior you may have already seen. If you're new to AutoCAD, you may have seen this behavior, selection preview. If you hover over an object, that object should react to the presence of your crosshairs. If you can see my screen, I'm hovering over this vertical line, and you see that line, excuse me, it kind of distorts. It starts to change. I don't know how better to say it. What's really happening, the effect is the line or the circle will get thicker, and it might dash. It kind of or kind of glows to signify you're over that object. So the objects we're going to select, they need to react to the presence of our crosshairs prior to making our selection. Otherwise, you might miss them, which was in the past, you could think you're over a line, select it, and you get another line, or you miss altogether. So here you can kind of see you get a reaction. There's some feedback. Excuse me. Some feedback to your presence. If I hover over a circle and hang out long enough, I'll get a tooltip. Typically, we know a circle when we see it, or we know a line when we see it. Sometimes you don't. A line could be a polyline. You never know. I like to use this tooltip as sort of a health check for my AutoCAD. AutoCAD uses quite a bit of memory, and as that memory sort of becomes less available, or I'm not a software guy, I am an AutoCAD guy, but there's times when my tooltip will not work. I'll hover over an object and I won't get a tooltip. That's just telling me AutoCAD is it's turning features off because it's getting ready to crash. There's a system inside of AutoCAD called adaptive degradation, and what AutoCAD does is it begins to turn off features that are not vital to the process to avoid a crash. So if I hover over an object and I don't have a tooltip, I'll probably save my drawing, shut AutoCAD down, and restart it. And when I restart, I'll have those little features. I don't really need this. I'm not really that into that tooltip, but I do want my AutoCAD to run properly and not crash on me. So that's kind of there's a couple little things that you can sort of just be wary of. Okay, selection preview. Things like text, you can kind of see text as a reaction. Pardon me. Check. Sorry, just lose my voice. Okay, I think I'm back. All right. So if I hover over text, you see a definite response. Hover over a line, you see a response. So that just kind of lets you know you're truly over that object. Left click when you see the object, and I'll hit escape. So that's one of your, I wouldn't call it a method of selection. It's more of an accessory to selection. It's just something that lets you know that you're over an object. Also, as a visual cue, you'll notice in AutoCAD there are a number of visual cues. I'm going to I'll lock my layer 0. And you definitely, I don't know if you were watching my screen, but when I locked layer 0, it was a pretty dramatic dimming of the objects on that layer. Objects on a locked layer do not give you that selection preview. They're like, no, you can't select me, I'm locked. You get a little lock, right? So if you're experiencing some weirdness in I want to select this line and I can't, you could, oh, there's a little lock there. That layer is locked. Let me go up to my layer control window, click the lock to unlock it. and then you'll get your selection preview. Okay. All right, one more. This is a true method of selection. This is one of my favorites too. Select similar. Select similar. I'm going to zoom in on this so I can read it. It says select one object, right-click mouse, and choose select similar from menu, and you will capture all the objects of a similar type on the same layer. So if I select one of my circles, left-click one circle, right-click, select similar, I just captured all those circles in my drawing. So select similar looks for two things. It looks for object type, like a circle, and then what layer that circle is on. So these circles are all on the same layer, layer 0. I'll hit escape. I'll left click this yellow square, left click, then right click, select similar, and I captured all the yellow squares that, in the drawing.
Will that work for blocks?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If I go into, I'll go back into the second floor plan from yesterday, and I'll go to model space. I want to capture all the windows. I'll left click one window, right click, select similar. So it's looking for not just a block, but it's looking for a block on layer A glaze, the A glaze layer. And so if I put a couple of these blocks on the A glaze layer, and let's see what happens. I'll left click one window, right click, select similar. See, it's looking for specifically that window block. So yeah, it's kind of cool, right? I mean, if you're doing inventory, I can't really do an inventory. I could delete these these windows, right? And that would tell me how many I deleted. But you also have your properties palette. We haven't covered that yet, but it comes up later today. If I right click and go to properties from the right click menu, here I can see I have 18 windows selected. So if you have some objects that you're trying to keep track of in a drawing, furniture or what have you, you can pretty easily do that with a select similar. Okay. Let me come back into modify commands. I'll close that other drawing so as not to be confusing. Any other questions on that? Questions on methods of selection, or questions on lasso versus window? Okay. All right. Okay. So I'll continue to sort of reinforce these. If you want more time to practice, let me know. But I'll kind of, as we're in other drawing things, drawing exercises, I say I'll use a selection window to grab these objects. I'll use a crossing window to, what have you, and hopefully that'll make things easier as you move forward with your AutoCAD usage. All right, let's move forward. Advanced draw commands. So our next page of the book here is advanced draw commands. Some of this we already covered, right? We covered polylines yesterday, sort of, with some detail, but we'll kind of get more into it. So according to this handout, this document, the advanced draw commands, and my fonts are weird today. They weren't weird yesterday, but the advanced draw commands are polyline, rectangle, and polygon. And I think a lot of you will probably be doing a lot of polylining of rooms or what have you. If I just want to doodle a polyline with Polyline, excuse me, I'll turn on ortho so I get a nice horizontal, nice vertical polyline. I'll go ahead and click Polyline, and I'm going to left click, and I'll move from left to right. I just specified my start point, and so it's very similar to the line. I click Polyline, left click start point, and then I'll move away towards the right with ortho on. I can type in 10 feet and hit enter. Then I'll pull down the screen, 10 feet, enter. I'm going to move left on the screen, 10 feet, enter. And I'm already sort of moving up the screen. I could type 10 feet in, but I'm going to use the close option on the command line. So you can kind of see on the command line it says close. And I know a lot of your polylines are going to want to be closed. So I'll click close. Clicking close, or typing C, or right-clicking and choosing close from your right-click menu is the only way to really truly close that polyline. Just bringing the Polyline's end back to its start is not, it would not be considered a closed polyline in AutoCAD. In AutoCAD's definitions, if you can say it like that. So if I go Polyline, left click my start point, 10 feet, enter, I'll pull down the screen, 10 feet, enter, left on the screen, 10 feet, enter, up the screen, 10 feet, enter, escape. The polyline on the right is not closed, the one on the left is. They look the same to me, but if I look at the polyline with property palette, I'll left click my polyline, right click my mouse and go properties. At the bottom of this property palette it says closed, yes, that's truly closed. I'll hit escape, select the other one, closed, no. So if I need closed polylines, I need to use the closed option to get those polylines closed. Okay, so I just used a polyline to create a square. You can use polylines for whatever. I'm gonna get rid of the property palette. So feel free to sort of doodle with that and start your polyline if you haven't already done so. And I'm gonna keep my ortho on for the time being, and I'll just sort of draw, just sort of doodling around. I'll close this polyline. So I just kind of made a boundary around my work area. So polylines, they look like lines. They have the same sort of infinite thinness when you first start. They have a defined width in AutoCAD as 0. They're 0 inches wide, which kind of gives you the benefit of being able to zoom up on your polyline or line all day long, and it will never change its thickness, which is kind of nice. So people who draw football stadiums can use the same design tool, line or polyline, as people who draw printed microchips or something like that. That is just that functional. Okay, if you're looking at my screen, if you're or not, I probably can describe this well enough. I've drawn 4 lines next to one polyline. They're both creating, if you will, a 5-foot square. If I left click on the line square, I have one selected object with 3 grips active. If I click on the polyline, one left click selects the entire polyline, all 4 sides, and I have not 3 grips, but I have 8 grips. Right, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 at the corners, 1, 2, 3, 4 at the edges. These are referred to as multifunctional grips. Even in the line object, there's a multifunctionality to the grip that can be sort of revealed if you hover. If I hover over the grip, I'll get a menu. So the menu options here are to stretch the vertex. That corner is also referred to as a vertex. Add a vertex. If I need to add additional section of polyline, I can add a vertex, or I can remove a vertex. So the polylines, if you were doing polylining for floor plans to attach to your FM systems, it's really convenient. There's a very convenient edit method with these grips and your object snap. If I have a need to fit my polyline into an unusual shape, if I hover over the edge grip, I can convert that polyline to an arc. If I have a sort of a round portion to my room, again, I can hover and can add an additional vertex. hover, I'll add an additional vertex on the left side. Like so, I'm just kind of doodling at this point, and I'll add a vertex on the inside. So that would be a very unusually shaped room, but that would be a little bit tough to draw from scratch with the Polyline. And you can switch into line mode, switch into arc mode with Polyline, but it's sometimes easier to use the edit features of the grips after the fact to create the shape that you're shooting for. Not as easy to do with line. Line is a little bit it's not as feature rich, if you will. So take a second or two or a minute or two and doodle with some polylines. I think I have a habit more of drawing with line. I don't know why that is, but I could easily draw most of the things I draw with Polyline, and it would probably save a little bit of memory. It wouldn't have as many things to keep track of. But polylines are great for what you can do after you've created them. Namely, if you're using facility software, you can attach that polyline to a database and have that polyline represent a room or a building, and there's a very easily measured area to a polyline. You hit escape to deselect it. If I select that polyline, excuse me, in the properties drop-down panel, there's a tool called List. And if I click List, I can see there's quite a bit of information here. Really more than I want. If you can see my screen, all these coordinates here are the corners, the Cartesian coordinates of the corners. Here's the radius of the bulge, that arc portion. Really, all I want is the square feet. This is there's 35 square feet, almost 36 square feet in this little rectangle. So it's kind of nice to be able to get that feedback, that some information back from your objects.
Hey Darren, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I completely missed. I've got about 17 things I'm doing at one time, and Todd said he learned something. So was that the last little bit you went through doing the straight lines and then also the radius on top of that?
Yeah. If I back up a little bit,
yeah, can you go through that one more time?
Yeah, I'll go through it 8 more times. I don't care. So I was just kind of sort of comparing and contrasting a polyline versus a line. If I click on a polyline,
you have the ability to move certain aspects of it.
Yeah, just by hovering over like the active grip. So if I hover over this edge grip, this is where I can convert to an arc.
Okay, yeah, that's probably what Todd was talking about. He learned, because I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, it's my job to know this stuff. So when the new stuff comes out, I'm like, that's not a feature. Oh wait, maybe it is a feature. And because if you've got, if I'm in a complex room, I'll go back to my second floor plan, and Perry's back. That was fast. Let's say I turn off the dimensions here. Dimensions are frozen. I could put a polyline. I'll just go polyline. I'll close this, and I put it on a layer that's faded. Let me put it on a different layer. So, I want to fit this polyline into this weird space in the stairs. I can sort of just grab this and I'll grip at it. Oops, I missed it. Grip at it into that location there. Ortho's on, so I'll turn that off. And I'll grab this one here, and I'll sort of snap into that location. Now, ordinarily, you wouldn't create such an abstract polyline to fit into a space, but just for the example, I'll left-click over here and snap that one there, and snap this guy here. And now I've sort of run out of vertices or vertex, objects. I need an intersection for that one. I'll go intersection. Where are you? Intersection. There you are. Something like that. And then I can hover over this grip and I'll convert to arc. There it is. Convert to arc. I think I got vertex, hover, convert to arc. There it is. I'll just sort of snap that to the midpoint. So it sort of filled that space. I mean, you wouldn't want to do a whole drawing worth of that, but the ability to sort of edit these polylines is pretty powerful.
Now, what about getting that other, I guess, midpoint over to the corner of the steps that would actually encompass that whole space?
This one here?
No, the midpoint.
That one here?
Nope, the one on the other side.
That one there.
Yep.
It was like I was intentionally avoiding what you were asking.
Exactly.
Right. So how do I do that? I'm going to hover over this grip. I'll add a vertex. Right, so I've got my.
Okay. So you just add a vertex, and when you add a vertex, you can do that, and you can pull it to the corner of the step. You basically can go around the banister or whatever you want.
Exactly right.
Okay.
But you know what? I want to show you something else too. Now I messed up here. I actually grabbed the grip. I didn't mean to. I'm going to hover, and I'll go add vertex, bloom, like that. So I could finish this up, But what I'll do is I'll delete this. So that editing your polyline is very convenient for an existing polyline that is supporting a room that's already drawn, I would say, or modified. If we had a room that was an office and we just converted its use and size to a conference room, we could take that existing polyline that's already attached to the database and just grip edit it. If you have an unusually shaped room like I have, I'm changing layers. Like this is a very unusually shaped room. There's a command called boundary. I think it's in the hatch area. This boundary tool creates a polyline from a closed area. Well, that's a closed area right there. So if I go and expand where hatch is and I click boundary, I get a little dialog box. I'll click pick point, and I'm just going to hover inside of this area. Left click, and you can kind of see it's identified the entire perimeter of that space. I'll press enter, and it just kind of created a polyline that sort of flows all around the outside edges of that space. I'll click on that, left click on that, right click, and I'll go to properties again. And this is a polyline, and it is closed. And it's a fairly detailed polyline, but I was able to create it very, very easily. So that command is not really in the book, which is kind of unfortunate. It probably should be the boundary command. I mean, you may not get a chance to use it a lot because it is very literal. If I were in my bedroom 3 and I used the boundary command, it would go around the doors, around the windows, and it wouldn't give me an accurate area. I'd have to grip edit that, but it's kind of a cool tool. The fact that you have this boundary tool that just sort of floods an area with a closed boundary, or the polyline itself was very, very cool for its ability just to be grip edited. So that's kind of what I had done there. Now, you don't really have the same functionality on a line. If I select a line, it's got 3 grips. The midpoint grip can be used to just move the line around a little bit. I've got ortho on, so I don't have a full freedom of movement, full range of motion. If I hover over the end grip, I can stretch or lengthen that line, which is kind of nice. If I needed to extend a line and didn't have boundaries to extend to, I could select my line, hover over the grip, and I could lengthen it. I'll go lengthen. And what lengthen does, lengthen allows me to make a line longer along its current plane. If I choose stretch, I can make it longer or shorter, but I can take it off plane. So I can sort of mix that around a little bit. So you got a couple options with your line, but the polyline is just, you can convert to arcs, you can add additional vertices and so forth. Okay. Other questions on Polyline or I guess that's all I've covered so far in terms of advanced draw commands. All right, we'll add one more command, the rectangle command. So rectangle is a command that creates a closed polyline, an already closed polyline. Also on your draw panel, on the upper right corner of the draw panel is rectangle. And this is quite easy to use actually. If you left click your rectangle, the command prompt says specify first corner. So if I left click one corner, I can move and left click an additional corner, and that creates that rectangle. It's done. It's unlike Polyline, it's not a continuous command. So it's rectangle, one click, two click. And you're just kind of specifying the opposite corners, and AutoCAD fills in the rest. Rectangle, left click, left click. Rectangle, specify first corner, specify opposite or other corner. Wow, Perry, I see. Well, a little. I wouldn't say you missed a lot. Actually, you got back to the office pretty quickly, and Vasilios suggested I record this morning session. So what I'll do is I'll make that recording available to you. We're still recording. I probably can stop recording now, and then you'll have access to that. We just did a few more modify commands and I guess 2 draw commands really. I added a little bit extra with that boundary command. Sure. Well, thank Vasilios. That was a great idea. I know that you can do it with the software. It didn't occur to me to do it. Questions on anything so far? Questions on that the rectangle command or the polyline command? So rectangle, I'll just kind of, I'm keeping an eye on the chat box to make sure I don't miss anybody. Any questions? The rectangle is a command that creates a polyline, an already closed polyline. So if you're polylining, if you're doing polylines in a floor plan like bedroom 3, if I'm looking at bedroom 3 in the second floor plan, I can polyline that very quickly. I'll just go rectangle with my object snap, 1 left click, 2 left click, and I've got my polyline for that room. Same thing for the master bedroom. Well, same thing for bedroom 2. So that would make my life very easy. And rectangle creates a polyline that's already closed. It's closed before you even finish the opposite side. So it's a nice tool to create that rectangular polyline. Where'd you go? So I'll erase a few of these just to kind of do a little cleanup. Oops, there we go. Rectangle. Both Polyline and Rectangle have a lot of command line or a number of command line options, and that's sort of what qualifies those or lands them in the advanced draw category. There's a couple ways to draw a rectangle. You can draw it based on a dimension or a defined area. You can change the rotation before you create it. And you can also have varying thicknesses or widths or what have you. So that's kind of the qualifier for the advanced command. If you're just doodling with a rectangle, it's not hard to do. It's just 1 left click, 2 left click. Okay. All right, questions on rectangle at all? So there's one nice thing about rectangle and dynamic input. So dynamic input is a feature that's typically on by default in your AutoCAD. And I'm sort of demonstrating, if you can see my screen, I'm sort of demonstrating dynamic input by making a selection window. The dynamic input is the portion at my crosshairs that says specify opposite corner or, and then it has a little drop down arrow and it has coordinate windows, an X and Y coordinate. So if I start my rectangle tool, I'll click rectangle, left click the first corner. Now I can type in X value and tab a Y value. So let's say I want to do a 12 foot by 24 foot rectangle. I'll type in 12 feet for my X, my horizontal, and hit tab, and then I'll type in 24 feet and hit enter, and there's a 24 by 12 inch, 24 foot by 12 foot rectangle. Rectangle, left click the first corner, I'll type in my X value, 12 feet, then tab, 24 feet, enter, and that's the result. So it could be a desk. When I say the desk I'm sitting at is 3 by 5, rectangle, left click, 5 feet, tab, 3 feet, enter. Well, my desk is probably not that big, but it's 2.5 feet certainly. Rectangle, left click, 10 feet, tab, 10 feet, enter. Okay. All right. How's that working? Is that working all right? Rectangle tool. Hopefully that's kind of easy, I think. But the hard part, I think, is just getting the dimensions in there. That's kind of an unintuitive feel to start with. The floor plan that we'll be drawing later on this morning is 16 feet 6 by 31 feet 7. So if I click rectangle, left click, I start on my first corner, we'll do 16 feet 6, tab, 31 feet. I just botched that. Let me undo it. Rectangle, left click, 16 feet 6, tab, 31 feet 7, enter, and there's my rectangle. Right, as Vasilios was saying, I didn't know tab worked. I always thought comma to specify the height. I like the tab too. The comma works. You know comma works. I try to teach the most intuitive way, which I can only assume I'm doing that, but I could be totally wrong. If I do the exact same thing, I'll go rectangle to start it. Left click my first corner, 16 feet 6. I can tab or comma. If I hit comma, it closes that window, and then I can type in the other value, 31 feet 7, and then hit enter. I like the tab idea because if you think about some of the forms that we fill out on websites, you move from one window to the next. I finished that too early. You move from one window to the next with the tab key. So that's kind of a familiar feel to us. 16 feet 6, tab, 31 feet 7, enter. So either one. I like the tab, comma. It works too. Okay, let's do this. Let's go ahead and take our morning break, and we'll come back and we'll add one more draw command, and we'll do a few modify commands as well. Let me give you a homework assignment if I can. I'll give you an extra 5 minutes of break time. If you don't already have that 8.5 by 11 printed out, the one called GD Bedroom Manual. I'm going to click on this and I'll bring it up. GD Bedroom Manual. Oops, I don't want to download it. I want to open it. So let me open this. It's called GD Bedroom Manual. I think it's called Handout. And no, it's just called, where are you? It is called Handout. GD Bedroom Manual Handout. That will be the focus for our next exercise. It's slightly different than just bedroom manual drawing. And what I did is I added a few extra dimensions to it. So it's just giving me a hard time right now. There we go. That works. This is what the drawing will look like. I changed a few dimensions to hopefully make it a little bit more straightforward, so you're not having to sort of rack your brain too hard. So if you can, please go ahead and if you haven't already download GD Bedroom Manual Handout. Please print it, or if you have a separate monitor, you can display it on your separate monitor, and then we'll shortly be getting into a drawing exercise with that as our focus. All right, and I'm going to stop recording, and Perry, it'll take a while for this recording to be ready, but when it's ready, I'll put it in the materials area, and you can download it. Hopefully, it's not too large of a video.